Okay, here we go. We're getting started. Welcome and good morning. Spanish 2-3. This is Unit 28 and Session 13, though it's Week 14. That's because your teacher missed a week of recording, so the sessions are still in sequential order, but this is going to be Session 13, Week 14. I'm Mrs. Daniel. I'm subbing for Senora Alvarado, and you are taking your midterms this week. Your window was Thursday and Friday, though some of you have already begun. And be sure to review well before you take your test and do your very best work. I want to see you finishing stars here in class. Okay, let's take a look at the calendar for the week coming up, week 14. As I'm getting to know your program better, I noticed that you have quite a bit of practice listening and speaking. I'm so glad to hear that because, as you know, languages are meant for listening and speaking as well as reading and writing. And I noticed that there's lots of time for you to practice those sounds that some of them are familiar and some of them are unfamiliar to you. And as you hear and recognize the sounds of the language more and more, you'll be more comfortable and you'll begin to recognize words. Fluent speakers, of course, like you and me in English, speak quickly and easily. But when you're learning a language, it takes a little more time to process than it takes in your first language. So use those pieces of the program to study and to learn better the language. We're going to be talking today about the vocabulary regarding the workplace. Our grammar objective is the affirmative and negative to commands in Spanish. And we're also going to spend a little time practicing common polite expressions that you'll hear in the workplace and also any time you're out in public. Let's take a look at the essential question. Remember, if you're here today live, you don't need to submit the essential question to me. You get automatic 10 points for that. But if you're watching this video, then you need to submit that by Friday for credit. So what is our essential question? It has to do with our grammar objective. How do we form the positive and negative to commands in Spanish? When you're writing the answer to this, don't forget to provide an explanation and an example for each one. So let's begin with our vocabulary. The workplace. So you're job hunting. What kinds of words are you going to see and use out there? How many of you have jobs, just out of curiosity? Sort of? Okay. Well, it's in your future. I see it in your future. Okay, so we're going to go over the words for the workplace. I'd like you to practice that listening and speaking by repeating the words that I say. And you can see the translation of them on the screen. So the first word, the word you'll use for the boss, because everyone has one, is el jefe. Could you repeat? El jefe. I didn't hear you. El jefe. Okay, look up here. Let me get out my little pointer. And we'll go through. Next one, el gerente. Gerente. Very good. El empleado. El empleador. You see that employ root in here in English and in Spanish. And I remember gerente because I think of general manager, like on a baseball team. You have the coach and then you have the general manager. So I use that general to remember head and tail. I always give myself little clues when I'm trying to remember new words. So this is you right here. Have a seat. Here's some more words you'll need to use this week. Let's practice them. El sueldo. I'm going to hear that from everybody. El sueldo. Very good. That's your salary. That's the money you're making. You'll be interested in that word. El ingreso. That's your income. El beneficio. That's the profit that the business has to make in order to pay you your salary. El inventario. That's the inventory, the items that they're selling. La deuda. La deuda. That's a little different to pronounce. You kind of combine the EU. La deuda. La administración. Yeah, and that I think of as administration, which is essentially the management. El trabajo. Okay, so that's your job or your work, literally. El desempleo. Okay, so that's when you're not employed. Los impuestos. And we all need to pay our taxes. That comes right out of our salary. We don't even get to see that most of the time, that part of the money. La promoción. La promoción. That's what we all want, right? We want a promotion so we can increase our salary. El horario. Eyes up here, guys. El horario. Okay, the H is silent, and it means your schedule. Trabajador. This is an adjective. These are all nouns up here, but this is an adjective. If I say, el empleado fue muy trabajador, that means the employee was hardworking. Here's the antithesis. Perezoso. El empleado fue perezoso. The employee was very lazy. So none of you will speak like that. Here we go. A few more words that you'll want to know. These are expressions. Despedir. That means to fire someone. Quedas despedido. That's what you don't want to hear your boss say to you. Quedas despedido. You're fired. Encontrar trabajo. Okay, cuando quedas despedido, tienes que encontrar trabajo. If you get fired, you have to go find more work. This is why you might get fired. Llegar tarde. Try this with me. Llegar tarde. That means to arrive late. But this is what you want to be doing instead. Trabajar. Trabajar. That's to work, the verb to work. And you trabajar so you can recibir. 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 Receive your pay. Okay. All right. So let's move on from the vocabulary to the grammar portion of our lesson. What are two commands? Two commands. Okay, but why two? Up here, two. Two commands. We've already learned usted commands. What are two commands? Stephanie, got an idea? Okay. Someone's on track. Second person. Two is the second person familiar. So take a look at this table. Compare column A and column B and tell me, what do you see that's the same and what do you see that's different? Take a look especially at the verb forms. Any observations out there? Okay. And on the right side? Okay. So number one, I think that would be the answer to number one, Tyler. What is the difference in meaning? Oh, okay. What do you know notice that's different between A and B? So you have the to form of the verb that ends in S in column A, and the usted form of the verb that ends in A or E in column B. Okay. So what is the difference in meaning between these two columns? Let's read the first one across. If I say, tú hablas muy bien el español, how does that mean something different from habla español?
So, would B be like a statement of yourself and a statement of another person or another object?
Okay. Tú hablas means you speak muy bien el español. You speak Spanish very well. Okay. And that's a statement.
All these are commands that you're telling to somebody else.
Okay, and here's the way you command them to speak Spanish. You say, habla español. Okay, so this is where you're making a statement that they speak, and you're talking to someone on both of these, to someone familiar to you. You wouldn't say this to a teacher or a parent. You would say it to a peer, a friend. So you would say to your friend, Stephanie would say to Edward, tú hablas muy bien el español. But when he talks to her in English and she wants him to speak Spanish again, she says, habla español. Okay. Notice she's changing the tense of the verb. Let's look at the next one. Tú compras ropa nueva a menudo. You buy new clothes all the time. And here's the command. Compra ropa nueva. Go buy some new clothes. Okay, do you see the difference? So, comparing column A and column B, then what conclusion would you form? How would you form a to command in Spanish? How do you go from this to this? What's your observation? Okay, look what's happening. S, no S, S, no S, S, no S. It looks like that's one way you could describe that change. But what other verb form have you already seen that looks like these? Okay, this we already said is the to form of the verb. Is there another form of the verb that looks like this? Here we go. Here's the pattern. The majority of positive to commands are taken from the third person singular present tense indicative form of the verb in question. In other words, one way to look at it is drop the S. The other way to look at it is this. Use the él, ella, usted present tense form to make commands for regular verbs in Spanish using a to mood or feeling when you're commanding it. Okay? These are the regular affirmative positive to commands. Okay? In Spanish, there's one way to make an affirmative command and another way to make a negative command. So now we're talking about the affirmative. When you want to tell them to do something, you change from the second person to the third person. Okay? Notice what Edward noticed. Going from the second person to the third person, it looks like all you're doing is dropping an S. But in Spanish, there's another difference that you don't see just in the written. In the Spanish, you change your tone. When you're speaking to someone in the to form, it's a very familiar type of feeling that you have between you. But all of a sudden, if you want to make a command, you change from being familiar to formal. You go from saying, you speak well, to speak well. And you know, even in English, when you change from a suggestion or a comment to a command, you're changing your tone or attitude. So you can see that even in the Spanish. In the English, you wouldn't pick it up. You might use the same words, and you have to use body language to understand. But in Spanish, things are spelled out as far as the feeling in the language. It's communicated by the ways things are spoken and by even the choice of words that you use. Okay, so here's an example of verbs with a regular to commands in the positive. If I want to tell you, someone I'm familiar with, to run, I say, corre, run. And they use that as an expression to mean hurry up. Like if you're dilly-dallying, you know, your friend's like going to be last in line at the lunch line, you'd say, corre, which means hurry up and get over here. Compra, compra pan y leche, go buy bread and milk. Habla más despacio, por favor. Please speak more slowly. But all of these are considered familiar. You speak this way to someone with whom you're familiar. All right, so I want you to try it. So how would you say to your friend that you want them to dance? Here's the word bailar. What would you say to them? Give it a try. It's an AR verb. So what would the third person singular be? Giovanni, do you have a guess for me? Okay, bailar is the infinitive. So how would you change this AR ending to the third person singular? What would you put here? Can I write on here? Try it. Would I do it up here? This is how I would do it. Huh? Then just start writing. And then I have to make it bigger. Can I just make it bigger? Ah. It looks like dropping the R, essentially. But what you're doing is you're dropping the AR and going down to the first person. So let's do the next one together. Right. How would you conjugate? What's right in Spanish, the infinitive? I think I heard Tyler. Escribir. Okay. And then how would you say for your friend? How would you direct your friend to write something for you? Correct. Very good. Awesome. All right, here's the last one. Let's give it a try. Watch. What's the verb that means watch or look at? Look at and watch. Both translations are the same verb in Spanish. Anyone remember what that is? Oops. Can I spell? It's mirar. To watch is mirar. So how would I tell my friend to watch? Watch this, you know. Mira. Mira. That's a very common expression. You'll hear that all the time. Mira. Mira. Even just used, you know, as slang. All right, let's take a look at what's coming next. All right, now most verbs are going to be conjugated that way. How do I get rid of this little guy? He's in my way. Oh, okay. But there are 8 verbs, very common verbs, that have an irregular to command. The reason they're irregular is because the verb itself is conjugated irregularly. This is another irregularity that you have to remember about this verb. All their conjugations are irregular, and they actually do form a pattern, even though it's called an irregular verb. All right, so the to command for decir is di. Let's just go ahead and go across and pronounce these words because you're going to hear them a lot. We won't pronounce all the way across. We'll just pronounce the Spanish. So for decir, di la verdad. Yeah, and just go ahead and repeat after me. Hacer, haz lo que quieres. For ir, it's vete, which means go away. Use that commonly. For poner, it's pon, ponte la chaqueta. Ponte means put it on, okay? Salir, it's sal. Sal ahorita. Okay. For ser, it's sé bueno. Okay. Saber is also conjugated sé in the first person. So that either makes it easier or harder to remember depending on the way you look at it. The next one is a tener, and the conjugation for the to command is ten. And a common example is ten cuidado. Okay, for venir, it's ven, which means come. Ven acá. Ven acá. So this line, row, actually column, has these expressions you'll hear all the time. All the time. They're used repeatedly in Spanish. All right, so now let's look at the negative to commands. There's another formula or pattern that we use when we're forming a negative to command, and it is quite different. You do have to use your conjugation again to form the negative to command. And you start with the first person present, a conjugation of the verb like we did before, but then we change the ending to the opposite to ending. So and then we make it negative by placing a no before the verb. So a negative command in the to form is going to have that S on it. It's just not going to have the right vowel, is one way to look at it. And then you have to put the no in there to validate it. Okay? So let's take a look at what that looks like. Right? So here's that first ending. You go to the infinitive, and then you go to the first person, and then you bump down to the second person to change it, but then you swap vowels. And you can also do that in singular and in plural. So you can give a plural negative to command. So you're talking to you guys. Okay, you guys be quiet. You guys come on over here. Like that kind of thing. But it's going to be with a no. Right. So if I want to say don't look, I would start with mirar. And I would go to miro, first person. And then I would, then I would go to the second person, miras, but then I'd hop over to the ER ending, mires, and then I would add the O. So if I don't want you to look, I'd say no mires. That's an AR verb. Let's take a look at an ER verb. This is the verb beber, to drink. If I want to say don't drink that, for example, I would go to bebo, which is the first person, Then down to the second person, bebas. Well, it says beber, so it would have been bebes, but then I go back over to the AR, switching to from the E to the A, and then add my O. So if I want to say don't drink, I would say no bebas. If I want to say you don't drink as in a statement, I'd say no bebes. Okay, last one, an IR verb, recibir, to receive or to take. Okay, I go to recibo, IR ending. I go down to the to form, recibes, and then switch over to the AR form, and it would be no recibas. Don't take it. All right. In Spanish, the E and the, it seems like a small difference, an E or an A, but the Spaniards have their ears tuned into those vowels. So if you say it wrong, they'll immediately recognize it. Well, just like we do. We recognize when someone's mispronouncing a word because of a language difference or whatever, but because their ears are tuned in, we don't think of it as much of a difference, but they really pick up on it because it indicates the tone or the formality or the familiarity with the person, and they're very sensitive to that. Okay, so here we go. Here's some practice. Hablar is an AR verb. The first person present tense conjugation would be hablo. We cut off the ending, add the opposite present tense ER, IR to ending, which would be S. So hablo goes to habl, add the S, and then we have hables. So remember, this is with the no form, only a negative, so it'd be no hables inglés. You don't speak English. Hablas would be you don't speak English, but if you're commanding them, don't speak English, it would be no hables inglés. Okay, let's try another one. Try one with an ER. What do you think it would be for comer? How would you say don't eat? Any volunteers?
No.
Okay, we're going to do negative, so it'd be no what?
Oh, no.
No comas, he says. Let's see. He's right. No comas el dulce. Exactly. Very good. Exacto. So he thought the AR, comer, is an ER verb, cuts off the ending, adds the opposite present tense AR to ending, which is as. There it is, right there. Excellent. Good job, Titan. All right, here's another one, an IR verb, decir. All right, this is a little different because you have to remember that decir is conjugated irregularly. So you don't say diso, you say digo, but the process of pattern is the same. You take off the ending, okay, go to the first person present, digo, add the opposite to ending, as. So I go from digo to digas. So if I want to say don't tell lies to my friend, I say no digas mentiras. Let's see if you can do that with an irregularly conjugated verb. Why don't you try the verb decir. Decir. Oh, we just did that. How about you try the word venir? Venir. How would you conjugate that one? Excellent. Here it is. From vengo to vengas. Don't come tomorrow. I won't be there. No vengas mañana. No estaré ahí. Okay, and this, as I said, works for singular and plural. So you can say, no hables con la boca llena to your friend. Don't talk with your mouth full. Or you can say, no coméis galletas en la cama. Hey, you guys, don't eat cookies in bed. I'll be in to check on you, and I'm going to count crumbs, right? That was what a mama would say to her little flock of niñitos. I've had to say that before. Okay, so that is the summary of our grammar section. We have one more thing to do together, but if you're answering the essential question, or even if you're here today and if you want to kind of summarize the lesson in order to apply it, how would you form a positive and negative to command in Spanish? Remember, if you're online or watching the video, you need to submit that by Friday for your 10-point attendance. And don't forget to provide an explanation and a sample. All right. As I said before, I want you to take time to listen to Spanish every day because that's going to make all the difference in the world. I suggested last week that you put on an animated video with which you're familiar and change the language setting to Spanish so that you can get used to the sounds of the language. How many of you have videos at home, or your little brothers or sisters have, like The Incredibles or Lion King or any of those? Oh, no? No? Really? Do y'all have Netflix or something? Is that why? Okay. Hulu? Okay. They may have language settings too. I'll ask my son if he has that. So even if you're not going to watch it, you're going to do something else and you can hear it in the background. Of course, the more you tune into it, the more effort you put, then the greater your attention. But I can't tell you how important it is. You learn languages more naturally the more you're immersed in them. So find a way to immerse yourself in the sounds of the language, and so you'll begin to remember them and be familiar with them and recognize them. Okay, after this session closes, we're going to activate this link here down at the bottom as a class, and we're going to practice some common, very useful expressions that you would use in the workplace and out in public. Courtesy is very important in the Spanish culture. They have an ear for courtesy and a proper way that things should be expressed. And offenses take it when you use words improperly or use the wrong tense of the verb. So it's important to know how common things that you would commonly say or hear are said correctly. So we're going to familiarize ourselves with that by clicking on this link and watching a little video segment that has some time in there to practice. So you can see what those expressions look like and what they sound like from a native speaker. Okay? So when we're finished, go ahead and click on this link right here and watch the video that follows. Okay? If you have other questions, please email me with them. This completes session 13, and this is Mrs. Daniel signing out. See you next week.